Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Darati Swaparantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrijatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Visakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute तप्त कांचन गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषाभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमः विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणि प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादि भाषातारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैतात् गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Prabhu, oh, there's still many pages in this chapter. This is like the longest chapter in the Krishna book. Okay,
Haribol, Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Nityananda,
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu, Jai
Nityananda
Shri
Prabhu,
Prabhupada.
Dandavat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Haribol, Prabhus.
Okay, I think it is
Hare Krishna
Nityananda
Prabhu.
Prabhu's turn.
Sorry, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
It's Nityananda Prabhu's turn to read.
Yes, I wanted to start, Prabhu, but it's fine.
Okay.
Yes,
No,
Prabhu.
it's fine, Prabhu. You start. I'll read later.
Or should I just read 2 pages and
Yes,
then
Prabhu.
let
Okay,
you read?
yes, Prabhu, you can do 2 pages. Thank you,
Okay.
Prabhu.
Yes.
Haribol. Sami Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
I was saying like the reading session was gone. If since it's back, everyone is looking for it. It's like a bag of drugs, you know.
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, I was too late. I was going to start. There's some game, and then I had to postpone it, and then it went too late. But tomorrow I'm gonna be there
Oh yeah.
at 5 o'clock.
Okay. So you said like it will run for like 25 minutes. Are you still busy or?
Yes, Prabhu, we can do because usually it's too after 10 it's way too late for Indian devotees and usually they need to go sleep, so that's why.
Oh.
But we
Oh,
can.
I understand.
Yes, Prabhu. We can read.
Okay, can I start?
Oh, thank you.
The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore a supreme call to all kinds of religionists, asking them with great authority to join this movement, by which one can learn how to love God and thus suppress all formulas and formalities of scriptural injunction. A person who cannot overcome the jurisdiction of stereotyped religious principles is compared to an animal chained up by his master. The purpose of all religion is to understand God and develop one's dormant love of Godhead. If one simply sticks to the religious formulas and formalities and does not become elevated to the positions of love of God, he is considered to be a chained animal. In other words, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, he is not eligible. There was supposed to be an E there, ne? Eligible for liberation from the
Yes.
contamination of material existence. Srila Sridhara Swami has composed a nice verse which says, "Let others engage in severe austerities. Let others fall to the land from the tops of hills and give up their lives. Let others travel to many holy places of pilgrimage for salvation, or let them be engaged in deep study of philosophy and Vedic literatures. Let the mystic yogis engage in the meditational service, and let the different sect engage in unnecessary arguing as to which is the best. But it is a fact that unless one is Krishna conscious, unless one is engaged in devotional service, And unless one has the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he cannot cross over this material ocean. An intelligent person therefore gives up all stereotyped ideas and joins the Krishna conscious movement for factual liberation. The personified Vedas continued their prayers. Our dear Lord, your impersonal features is explained in the Vedas. You have no hands, but you can accept all sacrifices which are offered to you. You have no legs, but you can walk more swiftly than anyone. Although you have no eyes, you can see whatever happens in the past, present, and future. Although you have no ears, you can hear everything that is said. Although you have no mind, you know everyone and everyone's activity, past, present, and future. And yet no one knows who you are. You know everyone, but no one knows you. Therefore, you are the oldest and supreme personality. Similarly, in another part of the Vedas, it is said, you have nothing to do. You are so perfect in your knowledge and potency that everything becomes manifest simply by your will. There is no one equal to or greater than you, and everyone is acting as your eternal servant. Thus, the Vedic statements describe that the Absolute has no legs, no hands, no eyes, no ears, and no mind, and yet he can act through his potencies and fulfill the needs of all living entities. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, his hands and legs are everywhere. He is all persuasive. Is it persuasive? Yeah. The hands, legs, ears, and eyes of all living entities are acting and moving by the direction of the super soul sitting within the living entity's heart. Unless the super soul is present, it is not possible for hands and legs to be active. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great, independent, and perfect. However, that that even without having any eyes, legs, and ears, he is not dependent on others for his activities. On the contrary, others are dependent on him for the activities of the different sense organs. Unless the living entities is inspired and directed by the super soul, he cannot act. The fact is that ultimately the absolute truth is the supreme person, but because he is acting through his different potencies, which are impossible for the gross materialist to see, the materialists accept him as impersonal. For example, one can observe the personal artistic work in a painting of a flower, and one can understand that the color adjustment, the shape, etc., have demanded the minute attention of the artist. The artist's work is clearly exhibited in a painting of different blooming flowers, but the gross materialist, without seeing the hands of God in such artistic manifestations, as the actual flowers blooming in nature, concludes that the absolute truth is impersonal. Actually, the absolute is personal, but he is independent. He does not require to personally take a brush and color. Personally, sorry, Prabhu. Absolute is personal, but he is independent. He does not require the personally take a brush and colors to paint the flowers. But his potencies are acting so wonderfully that it appears as if flowers have come into being without the aid of an artist. The impersonal view of the absolute truth is accepted by less intelligent men because unless one is engaged in the service of the Lord, he cannot understand how the Supreme is acting. He cannot even know his name. Everything about his activities and personal features is revealed to the devotees only through his loving service attitude. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly said, Bhaktaram Jnana Tapasam. The Lord is the enjoyer of all kinds of sacrifices and the result of all austerities. Prabhu, tapasya is austerities, ne? Something like that.
Yes,
Tapasam. Okay, bro. Then again, the Lord says, Sarvam Loka Maheshvaram. I am the proprietor of all planets. So that is the possession of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although he is present in Vrindavan and enjoys transcendental pleasure, in the company of his eternal association, the gopis and the cowherd boys, his potencies are acting under his direction all over the creation. They do not disturb his eternal pastimes. Through devotional service, only can one understand how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by his inconceivable potencies, simultaneously act impersonally and as a person. He is acting just like the supreme. Let me just finish the sentence, Prabhu, and I hand over. The supreme emperor and many thousands of kings and chiefs are working under him. Yes, Prabhu. Nityananda can continue. Nityananda
No, Prabhu,
Prabhu.
sure, you can read.
Oh, the
Please
supreme
continue.
personality. The supreme personality of Godhead is the supreme independent controlling person, and all the demigods, including Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Indra, the king of heaven, the king of the moon planet, and the king of the sun planet, are working under his direction. It is confirmed in the Vedas that the sun is shining, the air is blowing, and fire is disturbing. Distributing heat out of fear of the supreme personality of Godhead. The material nature is producing all kinds of movable and immovable objects within the material world, but none of them can independently act or create without the directions of the Supreme Lord. All of them are acting as tributaries, just like subordinate kings who offer the annual tax to the emperor. The Vedic injunction states that every living entity lives by eating the remnants of foodstuffs offered to the personality of Godhead in great sacrifices. The injunction is that Narayana should be present as the supreme predominating deity of the sacrifice. And after the sacrifice is performed, the remnants of foodstuffs are distributed amongst the demigods. This is called Yagna Bhaga. Every demigod has an allotment of Yagna Bhaga, which he accepts as prasadam. The conclusion is that the demigods are not independently powerful. They are posted as different executives under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they are eating. Yes, Prabhu, you can go down. They are eating prasadam, or the remnants of sacrifice. They are executing the order of the Supreme Lord exactly according to his plan. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is in the background, and his orders are carried out by the others. It only appears that he is impersonal. In our grossly materialistic way, we cannot conceive how the Supreme Personality is above the impersonal activities of material nature. Therefore, the Lord explains in the Bhagavad Gita that there is nothing superior to himself, and that the impersonal Brahman is subordinately situated as a manifestation of his personal rays. Sripada Srila Sridhara Swami has therefore composed a nice verse in this regard. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has no material sense, but through whose direction and will all the material sense are waking. He is the supreme potency of all material sense or sense organs. He is omnipotent, and he is the supreme performer of everything. Therefore, he is worshipable by everyone. And to the Supreme Person do I offer my respectful obeisances. Krishna himself declares in the Bhagavad Gita that he is Purushottama, which means the Supreme Personality. Purusha means persons, and Uttama means supreme or transcendental. Also in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord declares that because he is transcendental to all sentient and insentient beings, he is therefore known as the Purushottama. In other place, the Lord says that as the air is situated in the all-pervading sky, so everyone is situated in him, and everyone is acting under his directions. The Vedas personified continued. Our dear Lord, they prayed, you are equal to all with no partiality. Is it partiality? Partiality toward a particular type of living entity. As your parts and partials, all living entities enjoy or suffer in different conditions of life. They are just like the sparks of a fire. Just as spark stands on a blazing fire, so all living entities are dancing on your support. You are providing them with everything they desire, and yet you are not responsible for their position of enjoyment or suffering. They are different. They are different types of living entities: demigods, human beings, animal, trees, birds, beasts, germs, worms, insects, and aquatics, and all enjoying or suffering in life by resting on you. The living entities are of two kinds. One class is called ever liberated, Nitya Mukta, and the other class is called Nitya Bada. The Nitya Mukta living entities are in the spiritual kingdom, and the Nitya Bada are in the material world. That's us, ne?
Yes, Prabhu.
In the in the spiritual world, both the Lord and the living entities are and manifest in their original status, like live sparks in a blazing fire. But in the material world, although the Lord is all persuasive in his personal feature, the living entities have forgotten the Krishna consciousness, just as sparks sometimes fall from a blazing fire and lose the original brilliant condition. Some sparks fall onto dry grass and thus ignite another big fire. Huh. Yeah, ne? This is a reference to the pure devotees who take compassion on the poor and innocent living entities. The pure devotees enlightens Krishna consciousness in the heart of the conditioned souls, and thus the blazing fire of the spiritual world becomes manifest even within the material world. Prabhu, that statement reminded me that, a matchbox, ne?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes,
Yeah, it
Prabhu.
reminded me that a tree can make 1,000 sticks, but it can take only one to burn all the 1,000 sticks. The irony of it.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Some sparks fall onto water. They immediately lose their original brilliance and become almost extinct. This is comparable to the living entities who take their breath in the midst of gross materialists, in which case the original Krishna consciousness becomes almost extinct. Some sparks fall to the ground and remain midway between the blazing and extinct conditions. Thus, some living entities are without Krishna consciousness, some are between having and not having Krishna consciousness, and some are actually situated in Krishna consciousness. The demigods in the higher planets, beginning from the Lord Brahma, Indra, Chandra, the sun god, and the moon god. Prabhu, I thought Chandra was the moon. Isn't it the moon?
Yes, Prabhu. The moon god.
Why do we have? Yeah, but then why do they say Chandra and the sun god and then the moon god?
Oh, yes, Prabhu. I don't know. Maybe there's
Okay,
other
Prabhu.
also.
Prabhu, the moon is farther away, so that's why they tell it moon first, and then the sun is nearer to the earth.
It is like that, the father.
Yes,
Yeah,
Prabhu. But
Prabhu,
why
the
it's
moon. That's
mentioned
why they
Chandra
tell
and then
Monday.
it's mentioned moon? Isn't
Yeah, that's
the
why it's
same thing?
Sunday and then Monday. First day others, which is
Oh.
near, and then later over there.
Yes,
And I
Prabhu.
thought the moon represents feminine energy. That's what I thought.
Hmm. It's the mind. It's the representation of mind.
Oh, mind.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you check it correctly, like you can see, the mind is like a woman. It does not know what it wants, eh?
Yes, Prabhu.
Should I continue? Yeah.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Chandra, the sun god, the moon god, and various other demigods are all Krishna conscious. Human society is between the demigods and the animals, and thus some are more or less Krishna conscious, and some are completely forgetful of Krishna consciousness. The third grade living entities, namely the animals, beasts, planets, and trees, and aquatics, have completely forgotten Krishna consciousness. This Prabhu, beasts, what beast are they talking about? Because I only can remember beasts from Revelation in the Bible.
All the tigers and bears and ferocious animals.
Oh, they don't fall under animals.
They are type of animals, Prabhu. It's a subtype of animals.
Okay,
They
Prabhu.
state an animal, especially large or dangerous, four-footed one.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
I was at the last line. I actually read that, but then let me reread it. Oh, okay, it's fine. Planets, trees, and aquatics have completely forgotten Krishna consciousness. This example stated in the Vedas of the sparks of a blazing fire is very appropriate for understanding the condition of different types of living entities. But above all living entities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna or Purushottama, who is always liberated from all material conditions. The question may be raised as to why the living entities have fallen by chance into different conditions of life. To answer this question, we first have to understand that there cannot be any influence of chance for the living entities. Chance is for non-living entities. According to the Vedic literatures, living entities have knowledge, and thus they are called Chaitanya. Is it Chaitanya? Chaitanya, which means in knowledge. So, Prabhu, when we're saying like Lord Chaitanya, it still means knowledge. Is it the same meaning?
Where this 1 second? I'm trying to find where are you reading?
Oh, go a little bit down. Yes, wait up. Yeah, that line. You see that line where your cursor is go left.
Oh,
Yeah, you're nearly. You see, they called Chaitanya, which means knowledge.
no, it means the living entity who has knowledge. I think it means that.
Okay, Prabhu. Oh, I thought like Chaitanya means in knowledge.
Veda means
This.
knowledge.
Oh yes, yes, yes. The situation in different conditions of life, therefore, in is not accidental. It is by their choice because they have knowledge. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, "Give up everything and just surrender unto me." I think that's 18.66. Ne? This process of realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead is open for everyone, but still, it is the choice of the particular living entity whether to accept or reject this proposal. In the last portion of the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna very plainly said to Arjuna, "My dear Arjuna, now I have spoken everything to you. Everything now depends on whether you choose to accept it." Similarly, the living entities who have come down to this material world have made their own choice to enjoy this material world. It is not that Krishna sent them into this material world. The material world is created for the enjoyment of living entities who wanted to give up the eternal service of the Lord to become the supreme. Prabhu, this statement does not sit well with me. Like, what were you thinking?
Hmm.
You know?
Yes, sir.
Okay, like the living entities who have come down to this. Where was I? Hey, wait.
Isn't there?
Yeah, I'll read from the living entities who have come down to this material world have made their own choices to enjoy material world. It is not that Krishna sent them into the material world. The material world is created for the enjoyment of living entities who wanted to give up the eternal service of the Lord to become the supreme enjoyer themselves. Yeah, you see that statement, Prabhu. It always catches me up. They say, like, yeah, ne? You regret your choices now. Enjoy themselves. According to the Vaishnava philosophy, when a living entity desires to gratify his senses and forgets the service of the Lord, he is given a place in the material world to act freely according to his desire. And therefore, he creates a condition of life in which he either enjoys or suffers. We should know definitely that both the Lord and the living entities are eternally cognizant. There is no birth and death for either the Lord or the living entity. When creation takes place, it does not mean that the living entities are created. The Lord creates this material world to give the conditioned souls a chance to elevate themselves to the higher platform of Krishna consciousness. If the conditioned soul does not take advantage of this opportunity, then after the dissolution of this material world, he enters into the body of Narayan and remains there in deep sleep until the time of another creation. Hmm. In this connection, the example of the rainy season is very appropriate. Seasonal rainfall may be taken as the agent for creation because after the rainfall, the wet fields are favorable for growing different types of vegetation. Similarly, as soon as there is creation by the Lord's glancing over there, the
Garibo,
material,
is it here?
yeah, this one
Continue. Yes, Prabhu.
material nature, immediately the living entities spring up in the different living conditions, just as different types of vegetation grow after a rainfall. Haribol, Prabhu.
Garibo. Okay, Nityanandan
Yes.
Prabhu. You can read few pages.
Hari
You
Bol.
still have time. Hare Krishna Cake
Yes,
Prabhu
Prabhu.
Dandat Pranam Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, King Prabhu, please accept humble obeisances of glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Bol
Hare
Cake.
Krishna, Cake Prabhu, Dhamat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Cake Prabhu. Always to Srila Prabhupada.
And Semi Prabhu,
Yes, Prabhu.
I think Neil also wanted to join. Where is he? Because he was asking about the reading
Oh,
session.
maybe too late, Prabhu. Yeah, I was too late.
Oh,
My mistake.
okay, bro.
Yes, Prabhu. The rainfall is one, but the creation of the different vegetables is varied. The rainfall the rain falls equally on the whole field, but the different vegetables sprout up in different shapes and different forms according to the seeds planted. Similarly, the seeds of our desires are varied. Every living entity has a different type of desire, and that desire is a seed which causes his growth in certain type of body. This is explained by Rupa Goswami by the word Papa Bija. Papa means sinful. All our material desires are taken up as Papa Bija, or the seeds of sinful desires. Bhagavad Gita explains that our sinful desire is that we do not surrender unto the Supreme Lord. The Lord therefore says in Bhagavad Gita, I shall give you protection from the resultant actions of sinful desires. These sinful desires are manifested in different types of bodies. Therefore, no one can accuse the Supreme Lord. So, the Supreme Lord of partially in. Therefore, no one can accuse the Supreme Lord of partially in his giving one type of body to a certain type of living entity, another type of body to another living entity. All the bodies of the 84 million species come according to the mental condition of the individual living entities. The Supreme Person of Godhead, Purushottama, only gives them a chance to act according to the desires. Therefore, the living entities are acting, taking advantage of the facility given by the Lord. At the same time, they are born from transcendental body of the Lord. This relationship between the Lord and the living entities is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, explained in the Vedic literatures, wherein it is said that the Supreme Lord maintains all his children, giving them whatever they want. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, I am the seed giving father of all living entities. It's very simple to understand that the father gives birth to the children, but the children act according to their own desires. Therefore, the father is never responsible for the different futures of his children. Each child can take advantage of the father's property and instruction. But even though the inheritance and instructions may be the same for all children, out of the different desires, each child creates a different life and thereby suffers or enjoys. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita's instructions are equal to for everyone. Everyone should surrender unto the Supreme Lord, and He will take charge of them and protect them from sinful reactions. The facilities of facilities of living in the creation of the Lord are equally offered to all living entities. Whatever there is, either on land, on water, or in the sky, is equally given to all living entities. Since they all are sons of the Supreme Lord, everyone can enjoy the material facilities given by the Lord. But, Prabhu, you can scroll down. But unfortunate living entities create unfavorable conditions of life, fighting among themselves. The responsibility for fighting and creating favorable and unfavorable situations of life lies within the living entities, not with the Supreme Person of Godhead. Therefore, if the living entities take advantage of Lord's instructions as given in the Bhagavad Gita and develop Krishna consciousness, then their lives become sublime and they can go back to Godhead. One may argue because this material world is created by the Lord, he is therefore responsible for its conditions. Certainly, he is indirectly responsible for the creation and maintenance of this material world, but he is never responsible for the different conditions of the living entities. The Lord's creations of this material world is compared to the cloud's creation of vegetation. In the rainy season, the cloud creates different varieties of vegetables. The cloud pours water on the surface of earth. Probably you can scroll down. But it never touches the earth directly. Similarly, the Lord creates this. Yes. Similarly, the Lord creates this material world simply by glancing over the material energy. This confirmed in Vedas. He threw his glance over the material nature, and thus there was creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is also confirmed that simply by his transcendental glance over the material nature, he creates different varieties of entities, both movable and immovable, living and dead. The creation of the material world can therefore be taken as one of the pastimes of the Lord. It is called one of the pastimes of the Lord because he creates this material world whenever he desires. This desire of the Supreme Person of Godhead is also extreme mercy on his part because it gives another chance to the conditioned souls to develop their original consciousness and thus go back to Godhead. Therefore, no one can blame the Supreme Lord for creating this material world. From the subject matter under discussion, we can gain a clear understanding of difference between impersonalist and personalist. The impersonal conception recommends merging the existence of the Supreme, and the wide and the widest philosophy recommends making all material varieties void. Both the philosophers are known as Mayavada. Certainly, the cosmic manifestations comes to a close and becomes void when the living entities merge into the body of Narayana to rest until the end of creation, to rest until another creation. And this may be called an impersonal condition, but these conditions are never eternal. The cessation of the variegatedness of material world and the merging of the living entities into the body of Supreme are not permanent because the creation will take place again and the living entities who merge into the body of Supreme without having developed a Krishna consciousness will appear in this material world when there is another creation. The Bhagavad Gita confirms that the fact that is material world is created and annihilated. This is going on perpetually, and conditioned souls who are without Krishna consciousness come back again and again whenever the material creation is manifest. If such conditioned souls take advantage of this opportunity and develop Krishna consciousness under the direct instructions of the Lord, then they are transferred to the spiritual world and do not have to come back again to the material creation. It is said, therefore, that the voidists and the impersonalists are not very intelligent because they do not take shelter under the lotus feet of the Lord. Because they are less intelligent, these voidists and impersonalists take to a different type of austerities, either to attain the stage of nirvana, which means finishing the material conditions of life, or to attain oneness by merging into the body of the Lord. All of them again fall down because they neglect the lotus feet of the Lord. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the authority of Krishna Das, after st- Kaviraja Goswami, after studying the all Vedic literature and hearing from all authorities, has given his opinion on Krishna is the only supreme master and all the living entities are his eternal servants. His statements is confirmed in the prayers by the personified Vedas. The conclusion is therefore that everyone is under the control of the Supreme Person of Godhead. Everyone is serving under the supreme direction of the Lord, and everyone is afraid of the Supreme Person of Godhead. It is out of fear of Him that the activities are being rightly executed. Everyone's position is subordinate to the Supreme Lord, yet the Lord has pa- no partiality in His view of the living entities. He is just like the unlimited sky, as the sparks of a fire dance in the fire. Similarly, all living entities are like birds flying in the unlimited sky. Some of them are flying very high, and some of them are flying at a lesser altitude, and some are flying at still lesser altitude. The different birds are flying in different positions according to their respective abilities to fly, but the sky has nothing to do with this ability. In the Bhagavad Gita also, the Lord confirms that He awards the different positions to different living entities according to their proportionate surrender. This proportionate reward by the personality of Godhead to the living entities is not partiality. Therefore, in spite of the living entities being situated in different positions, in different spheres, and in different species of life, all of them are always under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and yet He is never responsible for different living conditions. It is foolish and artificial, therefore, to think oneself equal to the Supreme Lord, and it is still more foolish to think that one has not seen God. Everyone is seeing God in his different aspects. The only difference is that the theist sees God as the supreme personality, the most beloved Krishna, and the atheist sees the absolute truth as the ultimate death. The personified Vedas continued. Personified Vedas continue to pray, our dear Lord. From all Vedic information, it is understood that you are the supreme controller, and all living entities are controlled. Both the Lord and the living entities are called Nitya, eternal, and so are and, and so and so are qualitative one. Yet the singular Nitya or the Supreme Lord is a controller, whereas the plural Nityas are controlled. The individual controlled living entity resides within the body, and the supreme controller, as supersoul, is also present there. But the supersoul is controlling the individual soul. That is the verdict of the Vedas. If the individual soul were not controlled by the supersoul, then how could one explain the Vedic version of the living entities transmigrates from one body to another, enjoying and suffering the effects of his past deeds? Sometimes he is promoted to a higher standard of life, and sometimes he is degraded to a lower standard of life. Thus, the conditioned souls are not only under the control of the Supreme Lord, but they are also conditioned by the control of the material nature. This relationship of living entities to the Supreme Lord as the controlled and the controller definitely proves that although the Supersoul is all pervasive, the individual living entities are never all pervasive. If the individual souls were all pervasive, there would be no question of their being controlled. The theory that the supersoul and the individual soul are equal is a polluted conclusion, and no sensible person accepts it. Rather, one should try to understand the distinctions between the supreme eternal and the subordinate eternals. The personified Vedas therefore conclude, O Lord, both you and the limited Dhruvas, the living entities, are eternal. The form of the unlimited eternal is sometimes calculated as a universal form, and in the Vedic literatures, like the Upanishads, the form of the limited eternal is vividly described. It is said therein that the original spiritual form of the living entity is 1,000 the size of the tip of a hair. It is stated that the spirit is greater than the greatest and the smaller than the smallest. The individual living entities who are eternal part and parcel of God are smaller than the smallest. With our material senses, we can perceive neither the supreme who is greater than the greatest nor the individual soul who is smaller than the smallest. We have to understand both the greatest and the smallest from the authoritative sources of the Vedic literature. Literature states that the super soul is sitting within the body of a living entity and is as big as a thumb. Therefore, the argument may be put forward: how can something the size of thumb be accommodated within the heart of an ant? Therefore, the answer is that the thumb measurement of the supersoul is imagined in proportion to the body of a living entity in all circumstances. Therefore, the supersoul and the individual living entity cannot be taken as one. Although both of them enter within the material body of a living entity, the supersoul living within the heart is one directing or controlling the individual entity. Although both are dhruva or eternal, the living entity is always under the direction of the supreme. It may be argued that because the living entities are born of the material nature, they are equal and independent. In the Vedic literature, however, it is said that the Supreme Person of Godhead impregnates the material nature with living entities, and then they come out. Therefore, the appearance of the individual living entity is not factually due to the material nature alone. Just as just as a child produced by a woman is not her independent production, a woman is first impregnated by a man, and then a child is produced. As such, the child produced by the woman is a part and parcel of the man. Similarly, the living entities are apparently produced by material nature, but not independently. It is due to the impregnation of the material nature by the Supreme Father that the living entities are present. Therefore, the argument that the individual living entities are not part and parcel of the Supreme cannot stand. For example, the different parts and the parcel of the body cannot be taken as equal to the whole. Rather, the whole body is the control of the different limbs. Similarly, the parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole are always dependent and are always controlled by the source of the parts and parcels. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entities are part and parcels of Krishna. Ma- Mahima Mahama Vaishno. No sane man, therefore, will accept the theory that the super soul and the individual soul are of the same category. They are they are equal in quality, but quantitatively, the super soul is always the supreme, and the individual soul is always subordinate to the super soul. That is the conclusion of Vedas. Two significant words in the connection are Yanmaya and Chinmaya. In the Sanskrit grammar, the word Mayat is used in the sense of transformation and also the sense of sufficiency. And the Mayavadi philosophers interpret the Yan Maya or Chin Maya indicate the living entity is always equal to the supreme. But one has to consider whether this affix Mayat is used for the sufficiency or for transformation. The living entity never possesses anything exactly in the same proportion as the supreme personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Mayat affix cannot be used to the means that the individual living entity is self-sufficient. The individual living entity never has sufficient knowledge. Otherwise, how could one have come under the control of Maya or the material energy? The word sufficient can be accepted, therefore, only in proportion to the magnitude of the living entity. The spiritual oneness of the Supreme Lord and the living entity is never to be accepted as homogeneity. Each, each and every living entity is individual. If homogeneous oneness is accepted, then by the liberation of one individual soul, all other individual souls would have been liberated immediately. But the fact is that every individual soul is differently enjoying and suffering the material world. The word mayat is also used in sense of transformation, or sometimes it is used to mean by product. The impersonalist theory is that Brahman himself has accepted different types of bodies, and that his leela or pastime, there are however many hundreds and thousands of species of life in different standards of living conditions, such as human beings, demigods, animals, and beasts. And if all of them were expansions of the supreme truth, then there would be no question of liberation because Brahman is already liberated. Another interpretation put forward by the Mayavadis is that every millennium, different types of bodies are manifested, and when the millennium is closed, all different bodies or expansions of Brahman automatically become one, ending all different manifestations. Then the next millennium, according to this theory, Brahman again expands in different bodily forms. If we accept this theory, then Brahman becomes subject to change. But this cannot be accepted from Vedanta Sutra. We understand that Brahman is by nature joyful. He cannot therefore change himself into the body which is subject to painful conditions. Actually, the living entities who are part and parcel of Brahman are infinite, infinitesimal particles prone to be covered by illusionary energy. As explained before, the particles of Brahman are like sparks blissfully dancing within the fire. But there is a chance of their falling from the fire to smoke, although smoke is another condition of fire. This material world is just like smoke, and the spiritual world is just like blazing fire. The innumerable living entities are prone to fall down to the material world from the spiritual world when influenced by illusionary energy, and it is also possible for the living entity to become liberated again when by cultivation of real knowledge he becomes completely freed from the contamination of material world. The theory of the asuras is that living entities are born of material nature or prakriti in touch with the purusha. This theory can also also cannot be accepted because both the material nature and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are eternally existing. Neither the material nature
Oh, I was muted. Thank you so much,
Yes,
Prabhu.
bro.
We have to go to 6 o'clock prayers. Tomorrow we
Yes,
continue from this part.
yes, true.
Okay, who wants to start the 6 o'clock prayers?
Again. चेतोदर्पणमार्जनं भवमहादावाग्निर्वापनं श्रेयकैरवचन्द्रिका वितरणं विद्यावधुजीवनम् आनन्दं बुधिवर्धनं प्रतिपदं पूर्णामृतस्वादनं सर्वात्मा स्नपनं परं विजयते श्रीकृष्णसङ्कीर्तनम्
नम्नम् अकरि बहुधा निजा सर्वशक्तिस् तत्र पिता नियामितः स्मरणे न कलह एतादृशी तव कर्प्रा भगवान् ममापि दुर्वद्वै दुर्वद्वयम् इन्द्रियाम् इह जानि ननुरगः
Trinadapi Sunichena Taro Api Sahashnuna Amanina Manadina Kirtania Sada Hari Hare Krishna Bhaktajat Prabhu, please humble
Krishna Jai
accept my
Prabhu,
obeisances.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Hare
Haribo.
Krishna
Except for
Prabhu.
obeisance of grace to Srila Prabhupada. Haribo.
Welcome to reading session. Haribo. You want to read this, Prabhu?
Nadanam najanam na sundarim kavitam vajagadishakamaye mama janmani janmanishwari bhavatad bhakti rahituki twai.
Haribo.
Can I continue? Or?
Yes, Prabhu.
Ainanda tanuja kinkaram patitamam vishame bhavam buddho kripaya tvavapada pankaja stitadu lisat trisham vichintaya.
Nanam
Nayanam galat.
galadaya Vadanam gadgada rudaya gira pulakarnichitam vapu kada tava nama grahane bhavishyati.
युगायितं निमेषेण चक्षुषा प्रवृषायितां शून्यायितां जगत्सर्वं गोविन्दविरहेण मे
असिलस्य वा पदारत्थं पिनस्ततु माम् अदर्शनं मर्म हतं करतो वा यथा तथा वा विदादौ लम्पतो मत्प्रणा नतस्तु स एव न परः
Haribo. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious.
O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them.
One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense or false, of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly.
O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth.
O son of Maharaj, O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal savior, yet somehow or other, I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet.
O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at recitation of your name?
Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence.
I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally.
हरि बोल श्री शिक्षास्तकम की जाय
Die. To blaspheme
Jai.
the devotees who dedicated the last for propagating the holy name of the Lord.
The
To
second
consider the
offense is to consider the names of demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva to be equal or independent of the Lord of the name Vishnu. Sorry, of the name
Aribo,
of the
the
Lord Vishnu.
orders of the spiritual master or consider him as an ordinary person.
to blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures in Persian to the Vedic version.
Consider chanting of Hare Krishna to be imagination, the glories.
Aribo. It's about the Rasta interpretation. To consider, I forgot how it starts, Prabhu. You
To
can
give some
continue.
interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. Yes.
हरि बोल
Aha, to commit sinful activities on the strength of the holy name.
consider
Oh, it's
To
about
consider
it's about the
the
auspicious ritualistic, ne?
yes,
yes
To
yes, the
consider the
ritualistic.
chanting of Hare Krishna as a ritualistic. I forgot it. Ish. Offered in the Vedas, something like that. Karma Kanda. Give it to Bhaktajat Prabhu.
nine.
Instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name.
Then to not
To
have
not
complete faith in the chanting of the holy name and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter, it is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must guard against these offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, which is
Krishna
Krishna
Prema.
Prema.
Hare.
हरि बोल
Vancha
Also an offense
Kalpatarubhyascha
to
Kripa
serve the renunciation
पतितानां पावनेभ्यो
Vaishnavyo,
नमो नमः
Vaishnavyo,
नंद
Namo
गोदे
Namaha.
वैष्णविंद की जाय शिला प्रभुपाद की जाय
Jai
प्रेमानंदे
Jai.
Jai
हरि बोल
Haribo
Haribo.
Hare